Can you state your full name for the record?
Yes, I'm Paula Dickson.
How are you currently employed?
I'm an attending radiologist, pediatric radiologist at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta.
How long have you been a pediatric radiologist?
I've been there since 1992.
And can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where you got your bachelor's and what specialty did you get your bachelor's in?
Yes, I got my bachelor's at Clemson University in zoology.
And did you go to medical college?
I did.
Where did you attend medical college?
I went to the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston.
Where did you do your residency?
Residency was University of Maryland in Baltimore,
And what specialty was your residency done in?
diagnostic radiology.
And did you do a fellowship?
I did.
And what was your fellowship in?
My fellowship is in pediatric radiology at Emory University.
Is your specialty only pediatric radiology at this point?
That's right.
Do you have any certifications?
Yes, I have a certification of added qualification in pediatric radiology, which is taken after my boards in diagnostic radiology.
Are you licensed to practice medicine in any state?
Georgia.
What professional organizations do you belong to?
I belong to the Society for Pediatric Radiology, the Academy, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Röntgen Ray Society, the American College of Radiology, and the Radiological Society of North America.
Do you subscribe to any professional journal?
I subscribe to the journals of all of those societies.
Approximately, and I know you won't have an exact number, no one ever does, but approximately how many x-rays and scans and surveys have you read over the course of your career?
As far as skeletal surveys go, probably about 1,500. As far as chest x-rays, around 114, 115,000.
115,000?
Mm-hmm.
And as far as general, just scans in general, of any limb?
Of any kind, probably about 180,000.
Have you testified as an expert before?
I have.
Your Honor, at this point in time, the state would tender Dr. Paula Dickson as an expert in pediatric radiology.
Any objection, Mr. Hood? Ms. Bernard?
No objection, Your Honor.
She'll be admitted for that purpose.
Dr. Dickson, how was a skeletal survey conducted at the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta? And I will call it CHOA from now on, but I did want to say the full name.
Right. Yes, our skeletal surveys are done in accordance with the guidelines from the American Board of Radiology. So we take 2 views of the skull, we take a chest film, and then 2 oblique images. We get side views of the spine, and then we take a frontal view of chest, abdomen, pelvis, and then frontal views of each bone of the arms and legs, upper arm, lower arm, hands, and upper leg, lower leg, feet.
Once the survey is actually completed, how is the process set up at the Children's Healthcare to review those scans?
Yes, we double read every scan, which means 2 of us read it. Each of us reads it separately. Then we convene, decide what is the proper diagnosis, the proper findings, and then it's dictated.
Okay. So you're the person that signed off at the report, but 2 people actually look at it before you're allowed to sign off on the report?
That's right.
Are you allowed to communicate with the other person that's reading the scan?
Not until after we've both looked at it. We don't tell each other what we thought until we've both had time to look at it, and then we put our heads together after that.
If there is a difference in opinion, how is that resolved?
Right. If there's a difference in opinion, we talk about it with each other. We may ask the other radiologists that are working with us that day, get their opinion. And if it's something that we're not sure of, we will say that in the dictation, follow it up in 2 weeks.
Okay. I'm going to call your attention to January the 14th of 2022. And it's just so that we're clear, we've submitted 4 different sets. I want to focus right now on that second set, the full skeletal survey. Did you read the complete skeletal survey that was conducted of Jamison Timms?
Yes, I did.
And were there any findings that were pertinent to this case?
Yes, there were 3 healing posterior rib fractures that are in the back. and then a fracture, a compression fracture of one of the vertebral bodies.
Okay. Your Honor, at this point in time, I would ask that Dr. Dickson be allowed to come down and select the image that best represents what she's trying to show and literally show us where she saw these
Okay.
injuries.
And do you need the TV screen to be turned on, Ms. Fox?
After she gets down, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Doctor, you can step down from the witness stand. If you'll just go over there with Ms. Fox, please, at the
Okay.
podium.
It has popped up on June, but if you'll go back to January and then find these scans that best represent what you're telling
Okay,
us.
let's see, I might need help to go back to that set. Yes, here, this is the June set, so we're looking for the January. Okay, let's see. That's January. All right, so do you want me to show the findings from
Yes,
this
please.
case? Okay. Let me pull down to the chest film.
And Ms. Fox, if you'll identify those when you get to the scan that you're looking at.
I'll need to pull January back out.
Let's see if I can. Okay. And is there a magnification?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good. That's great, thank you. Okay, there we go. All right, so what
Okay,
we're-
time out just a second. Let Ms. Fox catch up with you on her.
Okay. Is this the one that you're looking at?
That's correct.
Your Honor, for the record, it'll be 6GG.
Okay, and are you ready for this to be displayed to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury? Okay, so the witness is looking at 6GG, which is going to be displayed on the television screen for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
I'll go back to my same question because we spent a moment doing that, but can you show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where you identified the rib fracture specifically in this film?
Yes. So what we're looking at, this is the rib, the back of the rib coming around to the front. So you can see there's a little dent, a little white, looks like a little ball involving the back of each of these ribs, 1, 2, and 3 ribs. And that's a healing callus. When you compare the opposite side, that's a normal rib. You come over to this side, you see that little round white ball, and that's just the healing rib.
Okay, and could we make that bigger so that it'll be
Yes.
very clear?
Let's see. Let's see if I can. Let's see. I might need to do it again. I'll get that magnified. There you go. That's it. Perfect.
And then, now that it's larger, can you show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where you've identified the callus on the rib?
Yes. Yes. So we've got rib 8, 9, and 10 that you can see better now that it's magnified, how they look different from the opposite side. So that's what we're looking at. 1, 2, and 3.
Which would be rib number 8, 9, and 10.
8, 9, and 10.
And is that 8, 9, and 10 the medical terminology for those particular ribs?
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated that it is posterior. Would
Correct.
that be the part that is closer to the spine or closer to the front of the body?
Yes, closer to the spine.
Okay. And you also had kind of showed a little bit when it was the smaller photo what the rib direction would go. Can you follow along now that it's larger so the jury can understand what you're talking about?
Yes. So we're looking at the back of the rib here that's joining, articulated with the spine, and then the rib comes around laterally and anteriorly, so to the side and then the front. So this is the back of the rib just as it articulates with, this is called the transverse process of that vertebral body of the spine.
And the callus itself, can you use the arrow to kind of circle where the
Yes.
callus itself is?
Yes, so here's one here, and up here. And this one is not quite as bulbous as the other two. That's it.
So, on a callus, can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury when you would expect to see a callus forming in relation to when the break actually occurs?
Yes. 10 to 14 days is when we start seeing this new bone, this callus formation.
And in connection with your viewing of these scans, did you look to any other source for a comparison?
Yes, so I asked to have the skeletal survey that was obtained at Erlanger in November for comparison.
And for what purpose were you using it as a comparison?
We like to see any old films, always helps radiology, see what's been going on before, how the bone looked before, was there fracture there at all? And I also had seen a vertebral body fracture. I wanted to see if that had been there.
Okay, I'm gonna stay on the ribs first. Did you note any breaks at all on the ribs on the Erlanger scan?
No breaks there.
Okay. And in connection, I'll go now to the compression fracture. Can you show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where the compression fracture is on Jameson?
Yes.
And then I will pull out the photo magically.
Sure, let's see. Let me find the, here it is, the lateral spine. So again, I may need help with this magnification.
Okay, hold on one second. Let Ms. Fox pull the one out of the,
That might be it.
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, it's gonna be 6HH.
6HH is what is being displayed on the screen in the courtroom to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
And again, can you show us where the compression fracture would be on that scan?
Yes. I'll get you to just magnify a little bit so the
Yes, ma'am.
middle of the film is bigger. There we go.
Is that okay?
That's good. That's good. So this vertebral body is just a little shorter than the others. If you look at the height, we're looking at the spine from the side, and so the height of this vertebral body is shorter. It's compressed compared to the others.
And did you measure what it measured when you reviewed the scan?
Yes.
What measurement does it have on January the 14th when you are reviewing the scan?
So I measured 6 millimeters.
Did you compare it to the scans that were done at Erlanger in November?
Yes.
What measurement did T10 have in November?
It measured 8 then.
So it lost 2 millimeters in height?
That's correct.
Is it the only vertebrae that lost height?
Yes.
Okay. At this point in time, may she return to the witness stand and we'll keep going?
Okay.
You indicated that you have viewed numerous scans at Children's Healthcare in connection with a number of different. Have you seen compression fractures in your work there at CHOA?
I have.
What most often is a cause of a compression fracture on the scans that you are viewing where there is a known cause?
Right.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. At this point, she hasn't been admitted as an expert in causation of any of these items, and so I think it's asking this witness to go well beyond the expertise she's been.
I'll sustain that objection based upon you can lay a foundation.
Do you get scans at CHOA where you know the cause of the injury? For example, you know the child's been in a car wreck, you know the child's fallen from a high distance.
We do.
In comparison to the known causes, is there anything unusual about the location of the compression fracture on Jameson?
Yes. The fact that there's only one, it's at a point of the spine where if there's hyperflexion, that vertebral body can fracture. And it's unusual in this age child.
Okay. What is hyperflexion?
When you bend at the waist, more than you normally would.
Okay. Does it matter which way it's bent, whether it's backwards or forwards?
And hyperflexion is when you bend forward, hyperextension is when you bend backwards. And it can be one or both.
Have you had an occasion through the course of your career to view x-rays of children that have broken their ribs during childbirth?
I have not.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to look at children with known causes of broken ribs? For example, the high-speed car crash, things of that nature, or
Yes.
something falling on a child, things of that nature.
Yes.
Is there anything about the location of these fractures that is consistent or inconsistent with, for example, a known cause of a high-speed car crash?
The posterior fractures, the ones in the back, are very unique. They don't usually occur from accidents, as you were talking about. It's the rib where it rubs against the spine will fracture if there has been some squeezing of the chest. It doesn't usually occur when somebody falls off the bed or is in an accident.
We indicated that the measurement in November was 8 millimeters. The measurement in January is 6 millimeters, which means you can show the compression. What was the measurement in June?
In June, it was 9.
So at that point, it was considered healed?
Yes.
When you viewed the x-rays, did you see any thing that would be consistent with an anomaly in the bone formation?
No, the bones look normal.
Specifically as to T10, did you see any evidence of a solitary lesion of histiocytosis X?
No.
What is that?
Okay. Histiocytosis X, you have histiocytes, which are types of blood cells that invade the bone. And with that, you usually see lytic lesions, like a hole in the bone, which I didn't see anywhere in the body. And they can have one vertebral body that just collapses. Usually it collapses more like a triangle, more in the front, not in the back. But we don't see that usually under the age of 5, and we don't see it without other changes of histiocytosis.
What other changes would we look for?
The more of the holes in the bone, like somebody just punched a hole in a bone.
Did you see anything on T10 in particular that would show that it was a failure of formation?
No.
Was it helpful that the previous scan did show it at a normal height?
Yes. That's why we like to compare.
Did you see anything that would show a I can't talk right this second, I'm sorry, developmental anomaly?
No.
Okay. Were there any other findings that were pertinent to this case?
No.
Okay. I'm going to call your attention to February the 3rd of 2022. Were you also the pediatric radiologist that read those scans for CHOA?
Yes, I was.
Specifically as to the ribs, what did you notice that was different by February than it was in January?
Yes, we can no longer see that callus formation, those little dense balls at the back of those ribs that had remodeled and healed.
Okay. So the language for a healing bone would be called remodeling?
Exactly.
So when it's broken, it calluses, then it kind of goes back to normal looking at some point?
Right.
How long generally would that process take in a rib?
Usually in a rib, by 2 or 3 months, we should see it look nice and normal.
Okay. And February 3rd, for sure, it's completely normal.
Right.
What
Yes.
about T10? Could you still see any compression fracture noted in T10 in February?
Yes. Okay.
And did you specifically look at T10?
Yes.
Based on the fact that T10 has not healed and the ribs have healed, does that help us or not help us in determining whether this is one injury to the child or 2 injuries?
It doesn't help much in this case, only because the vertebral body fractures heal a little differently than a rib fracture would. Since they're compressed, it's a different type of fracture. So it's a little tougher to say, did it occur at the same time, as if we were comparing callus formation.
Okay. Specifically, as to the ribs, and I want to ask this question very carefully. If there is no fracture at all shown on November the 21st, but there is or November 18th, I guess is when it was actually done, there is a fracture observed when you're there on January the 14th. Is it fair to say that the fracture occurred in that time frame?
Yes,
Okay, you indicated you would expect it to be 7 to 10 days before you can even see the callus. Would it also be fair to say we need to back 7 to 10 days off the time frame for the rib fractures?
I'm sorry, would you say it one more time?
If it takes 7 to 10 days to see the callus at all, so on January 14th, it couldn't have happened on the 13th because you've got defined calluses.
Exactly,
It
exactly.
couldn't happen on the 12th. We've got to back
Back it
at
up.
least the 7 to 10 days at a
Right.
minimum.
Right.
But based on the fact that it was healed in February, would you expect it to back up further than the minimum I just stated?
Yes.
Because it's resolved in
Because now
February?
it's resolved.
Okay. Same set of questions for the compression fracture. If there is no compression fracture at all visible on the November scans, and the compression fracture itself means it's squunched, so you would have been able to see it had it been there, correct?
Correct.
It's not where you're looking for a callus, you're noticing the difference in height?
Right.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the compression fracture occurred between his discharge date from Erlanger and the presentation at CHOA?
Yes.
If hypothetically, there were scans that you didn't view that occurred on December the 8th that did not show rib fractures and did not show a compression fracture, would we use the same analysis to, again, to shorten that time frame of when they
Yes.
could have occurred?
Yes.
Okay. I want to go ahead and ask you a few more questions. In your opinion, based on the healing stages, would this have been birth-related?
No.
Why not?
Well, if it were birth-related and the child was born in October, then again, we would start seeing callus formation much sooner. We should have seen callus formation by the first set of films in November. And we didn't, and so the time frame is not correct for the healing process.
Is the pattern different in a birth-related broken rib injury?
No.
When rib fractures would have been, let me ask that a different way. Were there any other tests needed to confirm the skeletal survey as to the compression injury?
No.
Why not?
Having the original film was key because I could see that there was a change. And then we do bring the kids back 2 weeks later, still was compressed. So it would have been more difficult if I hadn't had the first comparison.
Okay. You viewed the November 18th, 21 scans from Erlanger and the January 13th, 22 scans and February 3rd, 22 scans, and you looked at the June scans as well from CHOA.
Yes.
Did you see any evidence at all of metabolic bone disease?
No.
What is metabolic bone disease?
There are several kinds. Some people will talk about rickets, where you don't have the proper mineralization of the bone. The bone is very, not as dense. And we see, do you want me to say what we see with some of these? Metabolic, that's one type of metabolic bone disease. Another type is osteogenesis imperfecta, where you don't have the proper collagen, which is more of the framework of the bone. And both of those could cause the bones to be less dense.
Have you had children present at CHOA with osteogenesis imperfecta?
Yes.
Have you reviewed their scans?
Yes.
Do you know what it looks like when you see it?
Yes.
Did you see any evidence of that in Jamieson scans?
No, I did not.
Specifically, did you see any flared anterior rib ends?
No.
Did you look?
Yes.
Were they normal or not normal?
Normal.
Did you see any cupping of the radius and ulna on the right?
No. I
What
didn't.
is the radius and ulna?
Yes. So the radius and ulna are the bones of the forearm, and you can have a little shallow concavity, a little cupping of the distal ulna, and it's just a normal variant. We see that all the time. But cupping with rickets, it's a very deep cupping. You get fraying almost like you'd see on cut-off blue jeans where the threads are pulled out. You see that, and it's a metabolic bone disease. It's not just one wrist, one joint. It's multiple joints.
And did you view all the joints when you were doing your initial analysis?
Yes,
Did you review them in preparation for court today?
yes,
Did you know anything that you missed the first time through?
no,
Okay. Did you see any rough trabecular pattern or cortical tunneling in the forearms?
no.
What does that mean?
So the trabecula are again, kind of the framework of the bone, little lines we see in the bone on an x-ray. And if you do have a metabolic bone disease, if the bones are a little bit fragile, those will stand out, and you can almost draw them. Whereas with a normal bone, you can't really pick them out like that. And the cortex is the edge of the bone. It's a nice white line, and that can become thinned if there's a metabolic bone disease, but this was not thinned.
Did you note any multiple vertical lucent lines on the rib fractures?
No.
What would that have looked like if they were present?
Those are called looser zones, and you can see that sometimes if the bone is not dense enough, but they are a wider lucency or like a black line through a bone with white edges. I didn't see anything like that.
Did you review them in preparation for court?
Yes,
Did you see them when you reviewed it?
no,
Did you know anything on the skeletal survey that would negate a finding of metabolic bone disease? Basically, if somebody says he has it, what about his survey lets you know that's not a factor?
The fact that there were, again, no cupping or fraying of the joints, the bones of the joints. I didn't see any anterior flaring of the ribs where they can look a little bit more cupped than they should. I didn't see any things called Wormian bones. With some of the metabolic bone diseases, the osteogenesis imperfecta, we may see these little, almost like a little puzzle of tiny bones at the back of the skull. None of that, just normal bones.
Is there such a condition as temporary brittle bone disease?
That is not a true entity.
Okay, why not?
It was,
Judge, I would object to this point. I'm not sure what foundation you would lay for her to offer this testimony.
I'll sustain that,
Okay.
I'll sustain
I'll
that
ask it from a
objection.
different witness. Did you see any evidence that this child had brittle bone disease
No.
in his bones?
no,
Are you familiar with an article called Evaluating Young Children with Fractures for Child Abuse? It's a clinical report.
yes,
It's written by Hannity, Sherry, and DiMeglio. Would you consider these authors respected in their respective medical fields?
they are.
And ma'am, if you don't mind, if you'll answer yes or no. for
Oh,
the court
yes.
order.
Judge, if I could interpose, if Ms. Fox is planning on having a witness on direct go through periodicals and journals, that's not permissible in Georgia. It can only be done for impeachment. That would be bolstering this witness.
I'll save it for cross. I've got it marked.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Have you viewed skeletal scans of children with osteoimperfecta? I've asked that before, but I'm going to get a little bit more specific.
Yes,
Did you see any indication of osteogenesis imperfecta specifically in any of Jamison's scans? And for the record, you reviewed November's, January, February, and June.
I did, no,
Did you look at the metapoc sutures in the skulls?
yes,
And did it appear to be closing too early?
no.
When would it normally close on a healthy child?
3 to 7 months,
Okay, and he would have been right at 3 months when he presented?
3 months in January.
Okay. If you had that condition where they closed too early, what deformity would you notice in the child's head?
The suture is right down the middle of the forehead, so if they close too early, the forehead becomes pointy, right down the middle. It's called trigonencephaly, looks like a triangle,
So it looked like a character out of Star Wars kind of thing? Okay.
similar.
Even if it had closed earlier than expected, would that, in the skulls that you looked at, were you looking for the soft spots or anything that would indicate that his had not yet closed fully?
I'm sorry, what was that question?
When you looked at the skulls, images of Jamison, could you still see that there were portions that had not yet closed?
Yes, sutures were open, soft spot open.
Okay. Did you see any evidence of a vitamin D deficiency in the scans that you read?
No.
Did you look for them?
Yes.
Hypothetically, well, I can ask that from a different one then. Aside from the rib fractures and compression fracture, what was the condition of Jamison Tim's bones and skeletal structure itself?
Normal.
Did you indicate anything at all in any of the scans that you viewed that would have been considered abnormal?
No.
Did you note any bone within bones?
No.
If you had, would that have been something you would have noted in your report?
Yes.
Specifically as to the scans taken at Showa, did you note that anomaly?
No.
What is that called?
Bone within a bone is just the appearance of bones, where it almost looks like a picture frame. There's not really a bone within a bone, it just looks like that. It can be seen with certain metabolic bone diseases.
And I guess the bottom line is, when you viewed the last set of scans in June, would you agree with the analysis that they are normal in June?
Yes.
Your witness?
Mr. Hood?
Good morning, Dr. Dickson. How are you?
Good morning.
Can you give me your definition of the word suggests?
Suggest it, say findings that would lead me to believe that is what is going on.
Okay. If I said it was something that infers or implies a fact, but does not necessarily directly state a fact, would you agree with that definition?
I'm sorry, ask the question again, please.
If I used the definition of the word suggests, and I said it is to imply or infer a fact, but not necessarily to state that a fact exists, would you agree with that definition?
In part, it does infer. When I use that, I am almost positive. I wouldn't have said it to start with. I weren't almost positive.
Okay. Have you reviewed your records in this case?
I have,
When did you do that?
in the last month.
Okay. And these were images that were taken now roughly between 2 and 3 years ago now, some of them, is that correct?
That's right.
You have reviewed how many tens of thousands of images since these images? A lot, correct?
Yes,
You would, I would imagine, need to review these images and look at your record to refresh your recollection about your perceptions of these images, is that correct?
yes,
Okay. Subsequent to that also, you've, I'm sure, also spoken with members of the district attorney's office, is that correct?
yes.
How many times?
Probably twice.
Who have you spoken with?
I spoke with Ms. Fox and Mr. Hamby.
Investigator Hemby? And was that within the past few weeks?
Yes,
Okay. So your records and notations from the date that you reviewed these images repeatedly in your description of the vertebral fracture use the word suggests.
mm-hmm.
You don't use that word in relation to the rib fractures. Is that true?
That may be true.
Okay. So it suggested a vertebral fracture when you reviewed the images. Subsequent to that, you've conferred with the DA's office, and today, and frankly, since we began hearing evidence in this case, nobody's using that word suggests. It's just a vertebral fracture. Does that surprise you?
I feel that when I read the studies to start with, I didn't have the studies from June, which were the final studies when the vertebral body was healed. So that was a little more confirmatory than when I read the scan to start with.
So your conference with anybody, make sure I understand your testimony, your conference with anybody prosecuting this case from the state did not cause you to go from it suggests a vertebral fracture when you review these images
to today, it's a vertebral fracture.
That is correct.
Related to the rib fractures, you indicated, I think, to Ms. Fox's questions, that to your knowledge, you had never reviewed rib fractures deemed associated with birth. Did I understand your testimony correctly?
That's right. I've never seen rib fractures that have occurred with birth injury.
Okay. And you would agree with me, I think, that when children are born in America, either through normal vaginal deliveries or via C-section, absent some other usually emergent situation, we don't take babies and plop them in front of x-ray machines to see what may have happened as a result of the birth process. Is that correct?
That's true.
So we have no idea whether occult and asymptomatic fractures of ribs or compression of vertebrae occur, or how often they occur during the birth process. Is that correct?
There is a lot of literature that has done pathology work. This has been talked about since 1946, and there's a lot of literature out there. So the fact that we don't x-ray every child doesn't mean that we don't know this. And we do see so many kids in our ICUs and our NICUs that are newborns that get x-rays, and we haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, what you see is a tiny percentage of children who are born every day in this country. Is that correct?
Yes.
Again, in terms of the overall percentages, we and you have no earthly idea how often those types of injuries may occur via the birth process, correct?
I don't feel like I have no earthly idea, but we don't examine the majority of the patients.
So you don't know.
That's
Right.
true.
In terms of vitamin D deficiency or insufficiency, would you agree with me that there's, in that constellation of connective tissue disorders, let's call them, there's a pretty wide range of severity? True?
With vitamin D, just the lab work, your vitamin D numbers.
I don't want to be that, terrible question, let me start over, okay? Osteogenesis imperfecta, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, sort of the constellation of diseases or syndromes that are connective tissue disorders. Some of those present as very, very mild situations, is that correct?
There are some types of, there's a type of osteogenesis imperfecta that is very rare. The whole process is rare, but some types are extremely rare. There's a type of Ehlers-Danlos that is extremely rare. They say maybe 1 in 3 million people have it. Some can be very rare.
Okay. And in a mild form of one of those syndromes, or in a mild case of vitamin D insufficiency, would you expect to see necessarily radiographic findings of that?
No, we don't. Rickets is a chronic vitamin D deficiency where there are actually bone changes. With rickets, there can be fractures, always in mobile kids, and not posterior rib fractures. Just with vitamin D deficiency, that's a very common thing in the United States. About 40% of kids are vitamin D deficient. There are no bony changes and no fractures.
Okay. Well, there are no fractures that you know of, correct?
That's true.
That's the accurate way to say that. because not every child in every circumstance walking around out there that may have, and I'll use these phrases, occult and asymptomatic, what does that mean? What do those terms mean to you?
Asymptomatic, just no symptoms, and occult can be something that we can't see.
Okay, and these rib fractures in this case, would you define them as occult and asymptomatic?
They were not occult. And I can't speak to the asymptomatic, I just read the x-rays.
Okay. Well, were they occult in that, in terms of the surrounding tissue, swelling, edema, there were no other signs of rib fractures?
Well, again, I was just reading the x-rays. So, and with rib fractures, we don't really see the swelling on an x-ray. So but I could definitely see the healing rib fracture, which was not occult.
You indicated that, if I understand your testimony correctly, regarding what you see in the vertebral fracture, that it was either a hyperextension, which would be a backwards extension, and a forward extension. Is that correct?
That's correct. It can be caused by that, or it can be caused by an axial load if a child is set down really hard.
How much, throughout the different scans that you viewed, how much access did you have to the overall records of this patient at CHOA?
We can look at the chart.
Okay. Were you made aware, or did you become aware that genetic testing had been completed that showed a genetic variant for him?
I looked at the labs yesterday, not at the time of the reading.
Okay. So you are aware now that there is a genetic variant noted for this child at one of the sites that produces collagen.
I did read that. It said that was an unusual mutation that was not supposed to have any clinical significance.
Okay, well, technically it's called a variant of unknown significance. Is that correct?
Yes.
What does the word unknown mean?
I'm not a pathologist. I don't read those
I'm
reports.
not asking you for
But it's,
pathological. What does the word unknown mean to you?
how was it used in that sentence?
Variant of unknown significance.
Then they're not sure of the significance. Later on in that, they did say, though, they didn't think it had to do with clinical findings.
May have significance, may not have significance, correct?
That's what the report was saying.
Okay,
Again, I'm not a pathologist, so I don't really
understand.
use their terms.
Well, I'll withhold that, may ask it. All right, that's all I have for you right now. Ms. Bernard may have some questions for you.
Ms. Bernard?
Good morning, Dr. Dickson.
Good morning.
At the outset, do you think you could show us the scan, the part of the scan from February 3rd that you were matching up to the scan we looked at on the posterior rib fractures?
Yes.
And, Your Honor, if you could.
If you can step down and join Ms. Bernard there at the computer.
And then, while we were getting to stuff, if we have the comparison that you looked at from November 18th and December 8th as well, that we could do the comparison on.
I think I forgot. I think it was these.
Okay, do we have them on the desk, or?
Are those?
I mean,
three wanted?
I guess we can try the Elmo as well. if that
Okay.
helps.
Okay, Abby, go get him. He just walked out the door.
It's always tricky.
Give us just a second. It'll take just a moment to get all this. Or Investigator Hemby might know how to turn it on. Okay. it might be easier to show the photographs on the Elmo than to go back and forth from the computer screen.
And if, could we go ahead and since we have February 3rd up on the screen, can we get that projected or did the Elmo and the?
I think when you turned the Elmo on, it turned the screen off, didn't it?
That would have been my.
Okay, so Ms. Fox, pull out the photographs if you don't already have them.
We've
Okay.
got them right here.
Okay,
Okay, so we've got 6GG, and this is, so 6GG is from, I think, is that the November 18th?
okay, 6GG should be from January 14th.
Okay, so that's from January 14th, all right.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the one we've seen before.
Uh, There is definitely.
Okay, wait a minute, yeah. Okay, help her, number one. I know, we're gonna get it fixed. Hold up, because we're gonna get it fixed just a second. It'll just take a little adjusting. Is it the light causing the glare?
Yes.
Or okay, can you lower those lights just a moment? They won't go any further down? Okay,
Okay. So if,
and can you make that larger too on the Elmo, or is that as large as you can make it?
okay, so we're looking at States Exhibit 6GG, which is one of the scans performed on January 14th of 2022. And if you wouldn't mind redirecting our attention to the areas of concern you had noted.
Yes, so this is one we saw earlier, and so if you look at, let's see, I think, just so I can see the screen. So these areas that look like little balls here, right there, those are the areas we're looking at. Where you see a little round, dense looking ball.
And then if we can compare that to 6GGG, which I believe is February 3rd.
So this one. When you look at those same ribs, let's see if we can get it clear. So when you look at those same ribs, now you don't see those little white balls. They just look nice and smooth. Let's see, it's trying to focus itself. Let's see, different there. That's better. So now when you look at those same ribs, they're nice and smooth, there's no little white callus formation there. Okay.
And then if we can look at the scan from November 18th.
Take the envelope and pull them out. We hadn't pulled any of those out.
I'll
You're
have
welcome to
this.
pull them. They're marked, the envelope is marked.
These pictures are marked on the back too correctly, so we'll be able to get them back in the right envelope.
They are in envelopes by date, but they have the exhibit numbers on them.
Okay,
So
thank you.
The envelopes are dated, and I did show the envelopes to the defense. It simply states the hospital and date.
Okay, just want to make sure we can get them into the right envelope when we take them out.
This is 5G and.
This is from,
So this is 5B that the witness has, and this is from November 18th.
and if you could direct us to the areas of concern and consideration on this one.
So again, these ribs, these lower ribs, you don't see the callus there. They just look nice and smooth, just like the opposite side.
So let me just make sure that I've got that one.
And what number was the one that you looked at?
That's 5B that we are looking at right now. That's 5B. And then showing you the December 8th, and if you could find what you think is the best view.
So this is December
And we
8th.
could just identify, this is 5AA that we're looking at.
So this was the second skeleton that was done. And then again, these ribs look nice and smooth. Don't see anything fractured, nothing healing.
Okay. All right, so these are the 4 comparisons on the ribs that we're looking at. And if I could, I think, ask you to return to the witness stand so we can complete the. And I'm going to just leave these 4 out for now.
That'll be
but they are
fine.
identified. And then we've got 6HH over here. Okay, so Dr. Dickson, this was, I suppose, the main anomaly that you identified in the scan of Jamison Timms that was completed on January 14th, 2022, right?
Yes,
Okay. And did you examine Jamison Timms in person at any point?
no,
Okay, so just the scans.
just the scans.
And you did say that you had access to his chart. So
Yes.
could you walk me through when you first became aware of Jamison Timms' case, whether it was on January 14th or when he was admitted to the hospital the previous day?
Yes, when I was reading the scan on January 14th, we get the indication for the scan, and then I always look to see if there's anything that's been done in the past. And in the chart, it mentioned they had a skeletal survey in November at Erlanger.
Okay. And so you did have the indication that there was, let me ask you actually, what indication did you have on the chart for when you were going into looking at what was going on with Jamison Timms?
Yes, from what I recall, it said bruising was the reason for the scan.
Bruising was the reason for the scan on January 14th.
Yes.
And on a radiologic scan, can you find any evidence that is associated with bruising?
We sometimes, depend if it's a long bone, we may see swelling that would go along with the bruising, not so much in the chest area. And then sometimes if the soft tissue is not really swollen, it's tough to see.
Did you see any evidence in any of the scans of that kind of swelling that would be
No.
associated with bruising?
No.
And you also mentioned possible causes of the anomalies that you located on the scans as being an axial load, like putting a lot of load onto a child's spine, right?
That can be, yes.
And so about how much force do you know about how much force it would take to cause those injuries in that way?
It's hard to say, but we do see kids that fall out of 3-story window or 2-story windows and have no fractures at all. So it would take a good bit of force.
Okay, so it would take to cause a compression fracture.
That's right.
And so a good bit of force, does that mean it would take more than falling out of a 3-story window?
I think it would take more of a direct force. And with the vertebral compression fractures, there's also the hyperextension, hyperflexion possibility that it can also cause these types of fractures.
Okay.
Now, let me just back up a minute, because so you've been working at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta since 1992.
Yes,
And you did your fellowship over at Emory. I'm also an Emory grad, so it's, and I
Yes.
live right by the new hospital, so I get to see your beautiful new facility
all
all
the time.
And so have you you've always been in pediatric radiology? That has
Yes.
been your focus
Yes.
throughout your career. So is CHOA the first place that you worked after completing all your fellowships and residencies?
Yes,
So it's kind of a career at CHOA?
yes,
And have you been focused on the, I think it's called the Stephanie Blank Center for Safe and Healthy Children during that time? Or are you more generalized at the hospital?
we don't work over at Stephanie Blank. Patients are referred to us from there. A lot of our patients just come through our emergency room. I'm just based at the hospital.
Okay, based at the hospital. And were there any doctors who were involved in the case prior to referring it to you that you spoke to or communicated with?
No,
Were there any doctors associated with the case that you spoke to or communicated with after you completed your analysis of the scans?
no,
And how about Dr. Parikh, I believe was your second reader?
yes. Now, I didn't speak to the other doctors outside of I didn't speak with the doctors that had read the November skeletal survey. But when I read my surveys, yes, Dr. Parikh was my second reader on the one in January.
Okay. So did you have any communication with Dr. Zinnia Fleming?
No,
Okay. How about Dr. Gregory Melnikoff?
no,
Dr. Stephen Messner?
no.
Or Dr. Verena Brown?
I've talked to Dr. Brown before coming here, but not during the reading of the studies.
Okay. When did you have occasion to talk to Dr. Brown?
I spoke with her 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Was that the first time that you had spoken with her about the case?
Yes,
Okay. And did she contact you?
I contacted her.
Okay. And what was your reason for contacting her at that point?
She usually comes, she's our child abuse expert as a pediatrician, and she comes to court for child abuse cases, so I just wanted to know what to wear, what to expect.
Talking to a lot of people who don't have your scientific and medical background is probably what she told you to expect, right?
They just make things so that everybody can understand, and
Did she tell you anything else about the case at that point?
she did not.
Okay. So I'm going to echo a little bit of what Mr. Hood had already asked you about, but you completed a skeletal survey and it looks like 10:05 a.m. on, I'm sorry, that was when the x-ray was performed, was between 9:49 and 10:05 a.m. on the 14th. And then you did the reading of it at 11:46 a.m. Does that sound right?
Yes.
About how long does it take you to analyze a set of these scans?
It depends on the scan. Sometimes if they're findings that are equivocal, subtle, it could take 20 minutes. And if there are findings that are not as subtle, more like 10 or 15.
Okay. And how would you characterize the findings in this case?
Not subtle.
Not subtle.
That's right.
And so you took about 10 or 15 minutes to review these scans?
I can't remember exactly.
Right.
I would think it would be something like that.
And as to your findings, under spine, you put the vertebral body height of T10 is decreased, suggesting compression fracture, right?
Yes.
Now, what would it have taken to not have suggesting in there?
If it were completely flat, I would say. This was, it caught my eye. I wasn't confused by the fact that it was a fracture, but we don't like to put things in our reports that are going to accuse people wrongly. And so things that are, say the vertebral body wasn't completely flattened, but it looks shorter than the others, is why I probably said suggest.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding that correctly. The fact that it was at 6 millimeters meant that it was suggested, but if it had been, I don't know, 4 millimeters, you would have said this is definitely a compression fracture?
When it would be something that people that don't read these all the time would look at and say, oh, that looks different, that would be probably something that would not be as suggestive. When it's something that takes somebody who's read films all their lives to see, then I was just saying suggestive.
Okay. Well, then, I hope I didn't misunderstand you as to the meaning of subtle here. But you're saying it was not a subtle finding, but that only somebody who has read films their whole life would even notice this.
It wasn't subtle to me. It wasn't subtle to Dr. Parikh. But it might be subtle to somebody who doesn't look at chest x-rays all the time.
So what other, if any, evidence of the kind of trauma you are describing did you see in the scans?
Just the rib fractures and the vertebral body.
Okay, so what about any swelling or blood collection in the eyes or brain?
I don't read those. The neuroradiologist reads the head CTs. I don't
Okay,
look
so
at
you weren't
those.
even looking at the head CT at all?
That's right. Just at the scans that you've seen, just the skeletal surveys.
Okay. And now, particularly when you are dealing with infants and these very small bones, do you often order a follow-up MRI to obtain more information about the irregularity or abnormality that you have located?
We don't. Our standard of care is to get a second skeletal survey 2 weeks later, and in that way, we can either pick up fractures that are now starting to heal or see if what we questioned has changed, let us know if that was a correct finding. But we don't usually do MRI.
Why not? I mean, wouldn't you be able to get an MRI right then and it would be able to give you some more information about the loss of vertebral height?
Well, it's just not necessary since we could see it, we knew we could follow it up. MRI with a baby, it could have been done, but it's just not something that's really necessary.
Okay. Do you agree that you would have been able to get more information about this loss of vertebral height or what was going on with the spine if you had gotten an MRI?
That's true.
Okay. Are you involved in any, so it was your decision not to get the MRI?
No, that's
okay.
not my decision.
Whose decision
I
would
just
that
read
be?
the films. That would be the physicians that had ordered the study.
Okay, so would that be, in this case, Dr. Xenia Fleming? Or do you recall which?
I don't recall who was on the order, but that's not our standard at Children's to do MRIs with these kids, so it wasn't, but it wouldn't have been my decision.
Okay. Now, an MRI, does that have the same risk to a child as an X-ray in terms of the radiation to which they're being subjected?
No, no radiation.
Okay, so is there any negative consequence associated with an MRI for an infant?
If we can swaddle them in a blanket tightly and they'll stay still, there's not. If they won't stay still, we have to sedate, and then the child under 6 months has to be admitted for the night.
Okay. All right, so I'm just trying to understand if there's any negative consequences or health reasons why you might not want to order an MRI.
No, it just not necessary.
Okay. Now, as a pediatric radiologist who is familiar with all of the periodicals, et cetera, are you familiar with the Van Gemmert study regarding asymptomatic infant rib fractures?
I'm not.
Okay, so it would have been an article from 2023 in Children, the pediatric publication, by Martin Van Gemmert, Marianne Vlaming, Stephen Guybeff, Peter Nichols, and Martino Newman. So,
I don't know those names.
okay. And they're out of the Netherlands. Are you familiar with any of the research that has been done in the Netherlands and Scandinavia regarding their National Child Abuse Registry and the way that asymptomatic rib fractures are associated with accusations of child abuse?
I have heard of the Swedish studies in that they've been refuted by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Society for Pediatric Radiology.
Okay, well, so you're familiar with them in the sense that you think they're wrong. Are you familiar with them in what they say?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Not that particular one. I'm familiar with several articles that have been published in Britain and here, but not that particular one.
Okay. So an asymptomatic rib fracture would be one where the child is not presenting with any pain or obvious dislocation or anything else that would be apparent, right?
Correct.
Do you have any information suggesting that that was not the case for Jamison Timms? Or would you agree that this was an asymptomatic rib fracture?
As I said, I did not see the child. He came in for bruising, so I wouldn't call that asymptomatic.
Okay. So if I told you that actually he came in for bruising at the November appointment where there was what y'all believe was a totally normal scan and that was not the reason for the visit in January of 2022, would that change your assessment or opinion at all?
No.
Okay.
I'm just reading the films, and we have these are well-documented findings, so it wouldn't change what I said.
Okay, but in terms of characterizing it as an asymptomatic rib fracture, would the fact that that was not, in fact, the reason that he came in January, that was the reason for the other visit in November, would that change your assessment of it being an asymptomatic rib fracture?
Yes.
Okay, so given that information regarding the reason for the visit, would you agree then that what you have observed in Jamison Timms' scan on January 14th, 2022 would be an asymptomatic rib fracture?
I think that's hard for radiologists to say. I don't know if the child was irritable, eating. I don't know anything but what I see on the film, or what I've been told when they order it. So I can't really say.
Well, so I think if we can talk about this with your expertise a little bit, and we've got a little bit of time before lunch, which hopefully we can continue to elucidate this for the jury. What are the type of symptoms you would expect to see with a rib fracture?
It's hard to say in a newborn. As y'all know, if you have kids, it's hard to say what's going on with them. They might not be sleeping well. They might not be eating well. They may just seem cranky. It's just tough to say when you've got a tiny one.
Okay. But is there anything, that you would expect to see associated with a rib fracture?
In a baby, it's like I say, it's just a guess. I guess if you pick them up and they cry, but you never know why they're crying, and it's just tough with babies. That's why the x-rays are important, because we don't really know what they're feeling.
Did you, and again, I know you talked about a little bit of this with Mr. Hood, but did you, after you learned about the variant of unknown significance relating to collagen production that Jamison Timms had, correct?
Yes.
Did you become aware of his abnormal levels of lipase at any point?
No.
Okay. Did you become aware of the, let me see, the factor IX assay that was done that indicated abnormal results?
No.
Okay. Would any of these abnormal findings out of the lab work or blood work impact any of the assessment that you are making of the radiological scans?
No.
They would not, okay.
No.
So is there anything else that you haven't told us about that you have learned from these scans that the jury needs to know about?
No.
No other information other than what you've already shared with them?
That's correct.
Okay. If I could have just one moment, Your Honor.
Certainly.
Did you ever have occasion to work with a Dr. Stephen Messner relating to the scans that were done on February 3rd?
No.
Okay. So if he had prepared a report that talked about T11 having a loss of vertebral height, would you have been involved in that at all?
I was not.
Okay. And so if any of the reports had indicated different ribs beyond the 8th, 9th, and 10th, would you have been involved in those?
No.
I guess, how important of a mistake is that, in your view, mixing up the numbers of the ribs or the numbers of the vertebrae?
It's easy to do, particularly the vertebrae. Particularly on the lateral, the side film, we're counting, and if the x-ray's a little bit oblique, you may not see the rib coming down to know just where to count. So that would be, I think, pretty easy to do.
Okay. Okay, and you mentioned you testified in court quite a few times, right?
Just twice.
Oh, just twice you've testified
In the
court.
90s.
Okay, so this is the first time you've been to court in quite a while on this
Yes.
then? Okay, fantastic. And then was there anything else in your conversation with Dr. Verena Brown regarding Jamison's circumstances, other information that may have been learned, other conclusions that they had drawn and were seeking to advise you of?
No.
Okay. All right, I believe those are all my questions. Thank you for your time, Dr. Dickson.
Thank you, Ms.
you.
Bernard. Ms. Fox, do you have any additional questions?
Yes, may I approach the witness?
You can.
I am showing you, and I've already showed these to the defense, but I've marked as 7 and 8. Can you look at those for me real quick?
States Exhibit 7 and States Exhibit 8.
Are you familiar with what they are?
Yes.
And are you the witness that actually prepared those for me by putting arrows on those films?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, the state would tender 7 and 8. I think both sides have asked her to come to the stand and show where the breaks are. I had her prepare these for demonstrative purposes for the rest of my witnesses, since she can't stay with us throughout the trial, so that I could use them. I understand they would not go out to the jury, but I do want to use that as demonstrative evidence throughout the trial.
Are you offering both defendants 7 and 8 for demonstrative purposes?
Correct. It is copies of the original scans, but there are arrows on them to locate the injuries.
Mr. Hood, any objection? Ms. Bernard?
I don't think so. Our clients have of course never seen these before. so.
Okay.
I served them on the defense, but I served them a while ago.
Okay, and let me add just, for purposes of the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, just so you'll understand, when evidence is offered for demonstrative purposes, that means the witnesses may be asked questions about it here in the courtroom, but those exhibits will not go out to the jury room with you. So, any objection to State's Exhibits 7 and 8? Ms. Bernard?
No objection, Your Honor. I think, we've tried to have her compare them as much as possible, and ideally, I would love to have one with arrows for the other dates as well, but we have no objection to this.
Okay. So State's Exhibits 7 and 8 will be admitted for demonstrative purposes only.
I have just a couple follow-up questions. I'll do the last one first. You had indicated that you never talked to Dr. Mesner about the February scans, but you were the reader of the scans.
Right, right.
And the scans, I think you've testified, I don't want to misstate it, but we've gone over it several times. At that point, you could no longer see the rib fractures.
Yes,
You could see the compression fracture at T10.
yes.
And there's been a lot of language on cross-examination about the compression fracture and what language is used and not used. I'm going to just ask point blank, is the image that you saw of T10 a compression fracture or not?
It is.
And why is it a compression fracture?
Because in comparing before and after, there was a change. It went from a normal size, smaller, back to normal.
No further questions, Your Honor. That would conclude my redirect at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Hood, any additional questions of this witness?
No further questions.
Ms. Bernard, any additional
We
questions?
don't have any